Hey everyone, and welcome to HR Tech. My name is Sachit Kamat, and I run the product organization at Eightfold AI, a company that is on a mission to enable the right career for everyone in the world. And it's a mission that we're incredibly passionate about. And you'll hear more about our journey and where we've come from in a few minutes. Our talk today is going to be about building the future of talent acquisition with AI. AI is obviously a massive buzzword in many different industries, including self-driving technology, industrial automation. But today our topic is going to be about how we apply AI to the employment sector, to the hiring space, to the talent space. And we'll talk more about some things that we can actually do to use this incredible technology in our sector. In terms of how we spend the next 30 minutes together, I'm going to start by telling you a bit about our company, our journey, and where we've come from, and what we care about. We're going to talk through some of the challenges in the hiring space and in job seeking today, some of which I'm sure all of you are aware of. We'll spend some time talking about some of the recent advances in technology that have really made it possible to reimagine some of the things that we may have taken for granted in the past. And as a result, we will discover new areas that talent acquisition is headed in. And finally, we'll spend the last few minutes with some of the takeaways for the future of actionable things that you and your talent acquisitions teams can do today to use some of the lessons that we've learned here. With that, let me tell you a bit about our company. So we're a relatively young company. We were founded about 5 years ago by engineers that came out of Google and Facebook. And they worked on some of the foundational technologies that we use today for things like search, including Google search, on Facebook, the Facebook feed, and a lot of the personalization and relevance algorithms that are included in many of the products we use on a daily basis. When our founders looked at the employment sector, they saw an opportunity to apply some of the lessons they had learned over the course of their careers into a completely new domain, and in a domain that is so foundational to the way that the world functions and how businesses grow and how businesses succeed. Today, we're incredibly proud of the fact that we have grown up from a very small startup to a 250-person company. We're backed by some of the leading investors in Silicon Valley, including General Catalyst, Lightspeed Ventures, and Foundation Capital. We've raised just shy of $200 million over the course of the last few years. And the thing that we are most proud of is the fact that we have customers in over 110 countries across 19 industries, from foundational industries like retail and energy to groundbreaking industries like technology, financial services, and others. In addition to this, our products are now available in 16 languages. So we're completely international in the way that we operate. And it is something that we are focused on every single day to enable the right career for everyone in all of these regions. So before I go any further, I wanted to talk about the foundational problem that we solve as a company. And so what you're seeing on your screen right now is a resume. It happens to be from the 15th century. And it belonged to a pretty famous character from history, Leonardo da Vinci. So apart from the fact that this was written on parchment paper and effectively in real ink, which a lot of us don't use today, this resume is actually not that different from the resumes of today. Leonardo, in this case, talked a lot about his background as a military contractor and only briefly mentioned his work as an artist. So an employer that was actually looking for an artist would have been forgiven if they completely missed him. And this is a process that plays out every single day in the hiring space. If you think about how many candidates get passed over because they're missing the right keyword, that they effectively have to battle through all of the systems that are focused on keyword matching. And that same frustration is also echoed on the employer side, where employers today spend hours and hours crafting job descriptions that are focused on trying to match the right keywords so that candidates can find them. This system obviously is completely broken and inadequate. And I think given the advances that we've seen in technology, now is the time to rethink how we can solve these. So if you think about how people have reacted to this, to this current state of things, over the last few decades, the conventional wisdom has been the best way to get around, the current state of things is to network, is to go out there, meet people, put a face to a hiring manager, and effectively try to find a way to, to build a human connection. That being said, I'm sure given the fact that we're doing this completely online and virtual, there's not a lot of networking events happening today. Beyond that, networking tends to be something that a lot of candidates just don't love. It takes a lot of work. It is a skill in itself, and a lot of people just aren't very good at it. In addition to this, networking is one of those things where it's very difficult for diverse candidates to stand out. We as human beings are very trained towards effectively finding the similarities and being, tuning ourselves to the similarities between us. And so when you think about the experience of a diverse candidate that's trying to break into an industry where they are underrepresented, networking presents a real barrier. So if you think about this, as a result of these barriers, the outcomes that have resulted are honestly not very good, both for employers and for job seekers. So when Gartner surveyed employers and they tried to discover what were they seeing when it came to the candidates that they were receiving, it turns out that only 16% of the candidates that they see in their pipelines effectively have the skills to succeed in the current and future roles. So imagine going through the entire process of trying to hire somebody, meeting them, screening them, going through the whole process, trying to onboard them as employees, and then effectively ending up in a situation where that person doesn't work out. Well, that leads to billions of dollars of additional costs that employers have to bear, and the hiring process today just isn't helping. We also see this outcome being repeated when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is a reason today, just given the hurdles that diverse candidates face, that there is such underrepresentation when you look at women in executive positions in the US, or ethnic minorities, even lower representation. This is a current state of the world that we just think needs to change. In addition to this, hiring tends to be just incredibly time consuming. And so even in a situation where the supply and demand is relatively balanced, what we find is that it takes employers over 60 days to make an experienced hire. So think about that for a second. As an employer, if you have an urgent need where you need to find somebody to deploy for a specific situation so that you can execute on a business plan, if it takes you 60 days to hire, maybe another month or two to actually onboard and get that person productive, if you're lucky, you're talking about over a quarter deployed before you can actually act on a business plan. Clearly, this gives a lot of employers pause about whether to hire or not, causing more friction in the market. And we've also seen through data that only about 4% of all hires are actually made through existing talent pools. So despite the volumes of data being accumulated across most employers, that data isn't efficiently being used today when it comes to hiring. And this is despite the fact that when you start digging under the covers, what you find is nearly 40% of hires that are made were repeat applicants. They had previously applied for different positions. And so think about the experience that a candidate goes through today. They have to keep applying over and over again and effectively face rejection before they eventually get hired. There has to be a better way than this. So if you look back towards the last 10 years, with all of the developments that have happened in technology, if you just put yourself in the shoes of what you were doing 10 years ago, you'll find that the types of technologies that you were using back then are very different from the ones you use today. So many things, developments have happened, self-driving technology, the rise of social networks, the rise of big data. But when you start looking at the real underlying technology trends, what we are seeing and lessons that we can learn and technology that we can learn from that can be applied to this space includes better algorithms. So with the graph that you're seeing on your screen right now effectively shows Moore's law, which is an exponential curve, and that applied to the world of computing, and that resulted in a lot of innovation that we use on a daily basis today. When you start tracking how machine learning, AI, and deep learning are growing, we're starting to see a similar trend. And these better algorithms are making it possible for us to do the things that we never thought would be possible. When you start applying these technologies to a space of hiring and to the employment sector, you can solve fundamental problems that were very difficult to solve given the unscalability of people-driven processes. And so you can imagine a future where effectively algorithms are able to assist when it comes to recruiting. I'm going to talk more about this in just a second. We're also going to seeing this trend where there is an explosion of data. When you just think about the world as a whole, just in the last 10 years, the scale of data that we possess has expanded by over 40x. And this is as a result of all of our lives now moving to digital services. When you think about how you live your life today and compare that to 10 years ago, what you'll see is that you're generating more data through email, messaging, the use of workflow tools, the use of effectively social networks than you ever were before. And that is definitely borne out in these stats. And the same applies to the talent space. When you think about the data that exists in hiring systems, in resumes, in professional profiles, there is a massive explosion of data here. And how can we leverage this to completely change this industry on its head? And the last thing also to point out is that the cheap availability of computing power is a recent phenomenon. With several cloud-based services now coming online, it gives us the ability to innovate at a scale and use that computing power to crunch through this data, to apply these algorithms, and effectively find solutions to problems that were unsolvable before. So what does this mean when we turn this to a specific example? How has Eightfold leveraged these technologies to innovate in this space? And effectively, in our case, what we have been able to do is evaluate over 1.5 billion profiles of people, really understand in depth their skills, their experiences, where they've come from, their hopes, their aspirations, where they've succeeded, where they've failed, to effectively make better judgments on how we can help people navigate their careers and how we can help employers better understand the types of people that they should hire. We've also accumulated over 1.4 million skills, creating one of the largest repositories and a deep understanding of skills where our deep learning algorithms can really help assess what are the skills that any individual possesses today, what are the likely skills that they have not explicitly mentioned, what are the potential adjacent skills that they can quickly learn, and how can you effectively utilize this to improve your hiring practices. And we also have nearly 500,000 job titles today that gives us a very clear understanding of career paths. Some that are linear, some that effectively go back and forth across various functions. And this gives us a real understanding of how careers evolve and how people progress in their careers. So now when you start to turn your attention to when you start applying these fundamental technologies and the fundamental advances that we have made in this space, what could the world of employment look like in the next 10 years? And we have a vision around this to really make sure that every individual can attain their career aspirations and that every employer out there can succeed in hiring the right people. To make this possible, here is a future that we foresee. From a candidate perspective, we think that the entire model of job search will turn on its head. Instead of going to a website and entering a keyword and getting a set of matches, which is still the default way that everybody finds their jobs, we're instead going to move to a world where utilizing your data, your skills, and a deep understanding of your career aspirations, the right job will come to you. It will be delivered to you in your inbox. It'll be delivered to you in an experience where you don't have to search. It's one that is completely tailored to your goals, your aspirations, and it'll encourage you to apply because it knows that given your skill set, you're highly likely to succeed. And that is the power of the AI really being realized in terms of improving the job seeker experience. We also see the role of the recruiter evolving in a substantial way over the next few years. Instead of really being focused on recruiting workflows and the mundane tasks that can sort of consume the day-to-day working of a recruiter, their role will evolve into that of a talent strategist. Someone that will deeply understand the market when it comes to the availability of certain skills and really be able to make strategic decisions on what are the skills to emphasize for a particular role. When they look at a specific candidate, be able to really realize what skills do they already possess, what skills are they likely to learn quickly, and how they can adjust what the company is looking for so that the company can move faster and reduce that time to hire. It'll also include powerful workflow tools that allow them to reach out to these candidates, get in front of these candidates, and effectively be able to bring them onto their companies faster, thereby allowing their companies to execute their business plans and reduce that time to hire. We also see that the world with which managers will be able to operate on their teams will completely change. They will be able to hire much more for potential than they have been able to do in the past. Using that deep understanding of skills that I described earlier, managers can really understand at depth what are the skills that their teams already possess today, where should they be thoughtful about investing in building new skills on their team, and what are the skills that they should be sourcing externally by hiring. And this will give them a real in-depth analysis of their teams and be very strategic about how they manage their teams using skills. We also see the world of diversity, effectively being transformed with some of the tools that are available to us. Instead of diverse candidates having to, deal with some of the inefficiencies that exist today with search and with networking, instead their data will be brought forward and managers will be able to make informed decisions that achieve their diversity goals. They'll be able to see how changing job descriptions, dialing back certain requirements or dialing up certain requirements have an impact on diversity targeting and diversity populations. And they can be much more thoughtful about who to go after and how they can effectively build a team that is much more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And we also see for leaders that they will be able to execute talent strategies at the company level, using the power of the data and the analytics to really understand talent pools at the skill level, understanding the diversity of the talent pools, and really making sure that they are being very strategic about how they think about their company developing when it comes to several skill sets. And this change, we think, can really drive the ability for a company to respond to crises in a much more faster and strategic fashion. Take, for example, the COVID crisis that we've all been through. We see companies that have this ability of framing their workforce in terms of skills, being able to quickly use the transferable skills of their employees and reconfigure their workforce in a way that can achieve the future goals that they have. And so this will transform the way that companies manage their employees and strategically build their workforces. So when I now turn my attention to what are the tangible takeaways for talent teams and for your teams as you think about utilizing these groundbreaking technologies, the first one here is that if there's anything that we have learned from the last year and all of the disruptions that have happened across our teams and across our companies, it's that the skills that are needed for tomorrow are going to be very different from the skills of today. And while this transformation was accelerated by COVID, it is still going to be here to stay. Take, for example, the retail space, in which last year companies were hiring frontline retail workers. Those companies had to reconfigure their hiring plans to go after customer service representatives that could that could handle a higher volume of online orders. That same equation is playing out in several different industries, in several different domains. And one real key way in which employers can really react to these shifts is by hiring for ability and to effectively growing the people that they've already hired. The tools of tomorrow will enable this to happen. The second is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is more than a buzzword. It's the right thing to do for the world. And effectively, every company needs to think about how they can make this much more core to their strategy. The tools of tomorrow and the tools that we're building today really enable this to happen. With the analytics, the underlying capabilities that allow diverse candidates to stand out and leveling the playing field when it comes to diversity. We also know that budgets have been incredibly tight. When you just think about what a lot of companies have gone through over the course of the last year, clearly the problem has been acute. But as we know in the hiring space, budgets have always been relatively tight. So the way that the promise that AI holds is similar to the way that AI is starting to automate other industries. There are many tasks that recruiters are doing today that can effectively be automated and augmented with the AI that exists. Mundane tasks like scheduling for candidates and effectively moving requisitions forward. These are ways AI augmented recruiting could be a thing that really, really transforms the way and the cost of bringing and the time that it takes to bring somebody on board. And finally, this is something that obviously we see in our everyday lives, which is that the data is everywhere. This is completely true when it comes to the talent space, which is today candidates have their data in your internal systems. They interact with various public sources all over the internet. And having this data to make better informed decisions is really key towards making sure that you are maximizing business value. And these are solutions that we at Eightfold are deeply investing in because we believe that they can transform the outcomes for the world and all our customers. With that, I wanted to pause there and say thank you. And I would love to open it up for questions now. Thank you.